forgot to hit record. That's very important. Here's a handout. So anyways, my name is Cindy Miles, and I'm the president and CEO here at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber. I've been working with nonprofits for many, many years. Started with this organization about 6.5 years ago. And I had run a consulting business 3 years prior to that, consulting with nonprofits and small businesses. And then I founded an organization called the Incubator for Nonprofits of Kansas to help nonprofit startups specifically. And when I came here, I kind of transferred that work here to the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber because that wasn't work the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber was doing, but I certainly saw a need and it was easier for me to transfer that work here. And so I've helped hundreds and hundreds of people not only start nonprofit organizations, but teach them how to run nonprofit organizations. So I love doing this work. So I'm excited to present to you all today, work with you through a fundraising plan. So I would like for you to start by introducing yourselves and tell me what organization you're representing and what you kind of hope to get out of this today. So we will start with Emily. Emily, you're muted.
There we go. Okay. Sorry, I clicked over to my email tab. My little space bar trick didn't work there. My name is Emily Whiteside. I am the Marketing and Development Coordinator at Rise Up for Youth, and we are a local nonprofit that offers mentoring services to high school age students within the USD 259 school district.
Thank you, Emily. And then we'll go to here in the room.
Melissa Long. I'm with the Mulvane Community Foundation. I'm their new executive director and done some fundraising with Make ICT that we never had organized.
Yep.
So we'll learn how to organize it.
Yep. Good to see you in person. We talk a lot on social media, but
I am a busy person.
Yeah.
I'm Nellie Woods, and I'm here on behalf of Queen Nina, and she's in it's Miss Nina Ministries, and it's for recovering people, from investing in prison, need counseling, and to empower women just to do better and be more.
All right. Well, thank you. It's good to have you all here. All right. Well, we're going to get started, and I'm going to share my screen. So part of what we do today will be presentation. Part of what we do today will be work. So I want to take you through the process of kind of putting together at least some sort of a sample fundraising plan that you can then build off of. So part of the reason I think it's so important for organizations to diversify their funding and create a fundraising plan, but certainly to diversify that plan, that funding, is because over the years, as I've worked with nonprofit organizations, I've been intrigued by the number of nonprofit organizations that come to me and they say, I want to find a grant. And what I saw, it finally hit home during the pandemic, because what I saw was people that had organizations that had become heavily dependent on, let's say, grant funding, suddenly lost their grant funding, and they were really, really hurting because they had lost their grant funding. And I happened to have served on a board of an organization out in Butler County that I had repeatedly said, I think we need to diversify our funding more, because they were heavily reliant on grant funding. Mm-hmm. The other part of their funding came from a big event that they did every year where they made about $140,000 or $150,000 off that event. And then they had what's called earned revenue, which we'll talk about. So as they housed children, the state paid them so much money to house those children. Well, when the pandemic hit, they lost some of their grant funding because it was redirected to COVID-related things. They couldn't have their big fundraiser for 2 years. That was $300,000 about that they lost. And they weren't housing very many children, because the children were out of school for at least 6 months. And most of the reports for child abuse and neglect come through the schools, through the teachers. So they lost that revenue as well. And because they hadn't diversified their revenue enough or their funding enough, they were they were in trouble. And I saw that with other organizations as well. And so I had been preaching per se diversifying funding for a number of years. And then I thought, I've really got to get out and hit this harder, because I don't want to see nonprofits go through what I've seen them go through the last couple of years, because they were heavily dependent on one thing. So the interesting thing that I find about people that come to me and say, we want to find grants, we want to fund our organization with grants, is this. So this is a Giving USA report. I get these every couple of years. This one came out in 2020. So $471.44 billion was given across the US in 2020. Of that, 69% came from individuals. 69%. 324.10 billion came from individuals. Didn't come from grants. Only 19% of all of that 471.44 billion came from grants. So we have a lot of people that are focused on grant funding, and they're leaving out that other 69% of the funding that they could get because they're simply focused on grants. The other 9% came from bequests. So those are people who leave an organization in their will, and they want to leave a certain amount of money to that organization. And the other 4%, I'm sorry that this is so small, the other 4% came from businesses. So we also have the perception that we can raise a lot of money from businesses, but only 4% came from businesses. So the biggest amount of giving is right there by individuals. Yet, ironically, so many organizations don't ever develop a plan to just solicit individuals for a number of reasons. It's hard. You know, they don't want to actually make an ask. That's really scary. They don't know how to make an ask. That's really scary. And so they just go out there and go for grants, or they go talk to businesses. And actually, very few of them even have soliciting people for bequest in their fundraising plans either. And yet that still 9% is more than that 4%. See if I can make this a little bit bigger. So I just want to kind of look at who receives this money, just so you have an idea of where that money goes. So 131.8 billion went to religious organizations. Not surprising. A lot of us out there, we go to church, we're tithing, we're giving offering. So that's probably always going to say the biggest place where, you know, people feel obligated to give to their churches. The other 15% went to educational organizations or something related to education. 14% went to human services. 12% went to foundations, which most foundations are then redistributing those funds to other organizations. That's where we get some of our grants from. Public society benefit, 10%, 9% to health. So that's pretty small overall, right? 5% to international affairs, 4% to arts, culture, and humanities, 3% to environment and animals, and another 3% to individuals. So you can see who you're competing for as you're looking for funding out there, and wherever you happen to fall in all of that, you can see what your chances are of getting funding. I can tell you that in the state of Kansas, there's 21,000 nonprofit organizations, about 3,000 in Sedgwick County. So there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that are competing for funding. So you have to do it better than the other ones, or you get left out. All right. So why is it important? Why is it important to develop some fundraising strategy as well. Number one, as I already spoke to, diversifying your funding, making sure that you're not just looking at grant funding to fund your organization. It does increase your success. So again, I work with a lot of organizations that kind of just dilly-dallying in fundraising. They don't really have a good strategy for how they're going to fundraise throughout the year. And so they just aren't as near as successful as they could be in fundraising. It certainly lets you assess what are your fundraising options, what are those different ways you can fundraise, and plan to raise funds in those ways. It also helps you to keep your focus on fundraising goals. So that's part of what we'll do today is set some fundraising goals and see how we can strategize to reach those goals. It helps you to identify potential links to people out in the community and or to organization and really have just a formalized fundraising plan overall. So again, you're not just out there randomly doing things, but you truly have a plan in place to help you be successful. Oh, I just keep having to move us all over the screen. So part of the elements of creating the fundraising plan that we'll go into. So it's important that as you create your plan, you kind of look at how much income, how much revenue has the organization have coming in the past 2 or 3 years. And I know for some of us, our revenue's really down the past 2 or 3 years. And so that's where we're at. Where do we want to be? So what is our future plans? How much more money do we need to raise for our organizations in order to really have an impact? Because between that and then retaining our existing income, we have to identify what those fundraising goals should be. So if we had $100,000 every year for the last 2 years, and we want to retain, let's say 30,000 of those funds, and next year we want to get to $150,000. So we have to figure out what's the difference in what we want to raise. So 70,000, because we want to retain that 30 plus that 50 is 120,000, right? I think I did the math right.
Yeah.
anyways, that allows us again to set our fundraising goals. And so we don't want to we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're not thinking about retaining that existing income. So it's important to identify where you've been, where you want to go. And you go, please stop and ask questions if you want, because I don't want to just be, I'm certainly willing to entertain questions as we go along.
Okay, well,
I'll throw one out here just
Okay, absolutely.
maybe if you could address parts of it throughout the presentation. We went to the Kansas Economic Outlook Conference yesterday.
Yes,
which
I
is
missed
highly
that.
interesting. Always enjoy
Yes.
going.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they mentioned is that, especially with the events of the last 2 weeks, we're at a very high likelihood of entering a national recession. And so what is that, it's funny because we were talking about diversifying our fundraising yesterday in light of this information. How do you diversify to combat recession? Is there kind of one way that you lean into it, or do you lean into a new strategy for each of these elements of your fundraising? If you have any kind of input on that, I'd love to hear it.
Okay, yeah, I'll talk about that. And you really would need to adapt your strategy to what the environment is like, what the economic environment is like. It's just like during COVID, when we realize that our fundraising events, they're either not going to work like they used to because we can't do them in person. So we either adapt those fundraising events or we just don't do them, and we figure out how do we solicit more private donors for funding. If we lose our grant funding, then if it looks like that's going to decrease, so what are the other areas that will increase our goals? So that's kind of how you would adapt based on what's going on in the economy. And we saw that a whole lot, of course, during COVID, because suddenly nonprofit organizations were panicked about how they're going to change their funding strategies. All right.
On slide 3, were this percentages of the whole or to personal giving or individual giving?
These were percentages of the whole.
Okay.
Are you gonna be able to give us?
I am. I'm going to send this presentation out to you. All right. So here's our funding opportunities. And again, sometimes we just think about those funding opportunities that are grants, or people love to do special events. They love to do fundraising events. Me, I think they're a whole lot of work, but I do know organizations that do like a fundraising event every couple of months. And I'm overwhelmed by the fact that they do that. I know they've got to be overwhelmed as well, because that's a lot of work to do. And honestly, if you really were to break down the cost, the employee cost per hour of putting some of those, and if you would just figure not only, you know, how much money did you put into renting the place and the food and all that, and then how much money you get back. People look at that often and they think, okay, well, here's our net profit, but they don't look at all the time that staff put into that and consider that in their net profit. So anyways, so individual donors certainly is one of the ways, and one of the biggest ways we've heard to actually get revenue, get funding in your organization. Certainly renewing annual donors. So once you get those individuals donors giving, and I consider those new individual donors, then keeping those donors giving. So renewing annual donors, people that will give annually to your organization. Certainly prospective annual donors as well, getting them to give. Major donors. So those are those people that don't mind to give you 10,000 or 100,000 or 20,000. And there's people out there that do that on an ongoing basis. Certainly board giving. So 100% of any nonprofit organization's board should give financially. Sure, they give of their time and their talent, but they also should give of their treasure. And that shows their commitment to the organization. And generally, organizations will set an amount, or they will just say, we ask that you give a stretch gift. So those amounts vary from one nonprofit organization to the next. I know organizations that they want their board members to give $10,000 a year, and they only go out and get board members that have lots of money. I know organizations that ask their board members to give $25 a year, because maybe the people that they're engaging on their board aren't people with a lot of money, but maybe some of them are people that they actually serve. So people in recovery, that kind of thing, that or people, you know, that want to serve on a board and they just need to show what their commitment is. So certainly board giving. Planned giving, again, that's those bequests that I'm surprised how few organizations actually go and try to solicit being on somebody's will. They don't know how to do that work. There's a guy in town that I've had to do a couple of sessions for us here at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber that is an expert at that. It has definitely a fantastic presentation.
Kansas Community Foundation.
Mhm.
They have a toolkit you can download.
They
called
do.
Keep Five in Kansas.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've used that already. A couple times.
Good for you.
And
What's the name of it?
it's called Keep Five in Kansas. It's geared towards community foundations, but it's talking about how to plan your will, 5% of your estate, so that it benefits your community that you've lived in.
Yeah, that's great. So the other things are, as I've already mentioned, special events, fundraising events of different sorts. Certainly private foundations. And I think when I've looked at private foundations in the state of Kansas, and those are the community foundations, which are all over. Those are the Koch Foundation. I mean, there's just tons and tons of foundations, including family foundations. I think there's like 400 across the state of Kansas. So there's a lot. Certainly government grants. There's a lot of government grants out there, state, federal. We've seen certainly some government grants that have come out through ARPA funding in the last couple of years through both the city and the county. So those kinds of grants as well. Business donors and or sponsors. So again, that's only 4%, but that's another funder. And then of course, sponsorships. It's another funding stream. Oh, and earned revenue. Sorry, I got this too big, I guess. So earned revenue. Does everybody know what your earned revenue is? Questions? You think? I'll explain it just in case. So earned revenue here at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber, part of our earned revenue comes from membership. So things that we sell, training that we offer, consulting that we do, that's earned revenue. So any kind of services that you provide, as I mentioned earlier, the place that I used to serve on the board with, it was hit so hard that housed children in a children's home. The state provided them so much funding per day, per child to house those children while they were in their care. That's earned revenue. So that certainly is a big way. I know for us and other organizations, a big way. Can I put that info for toolkit in the chat? Yes. What was it again?
Keep 5 in Kansas. And it's on the Kansas Community Foundation. Wait. Kansas Association of Community Foundations website. Yeah. And it just encourages people to leave 5% of their estate planning to a nonprofit or a community foundation so that it can be reinvested.
All right, so let's move on. So whose responsibility is it for development? A lot of us that are in nonprofit organizations are in small to medium-sized nonprofit organizations. Most nonprofit organizations are small to medium-sized organizations, which means they don't always have, often they don't have anybody specifically to do development for the organizations. And so as a result, this is really important that the staff and the board be involved in fundraising for the organization, especially when you don't have a paid any paid development people. The executive director should always be involved in the fundraising process, but it is really, it requires teamwork, the board and the staff working together, whatever staff is working on that. Having that fundraising plan in place. So that's the roadmap that the board and the staff are going to use. And then having good communication about what's going on, especially who's asking who for what. That's really important because you never want to be making an ask of somebody and then find out somebody on your board has asked the same person. That's kind of embarrassing. It looks like, you know, you're not really coordinating everything that you do. So that the teamwork plus the fundraising plan plus the communication really helps you to achieve success in your fundraising. All right, this is where we're going to get out your worksheets. Everybody got their worksheet? So I'm going to explain to you how this template that I have provided you, and hopefully everybody that out there that's on Zoom got this by email. Anybody not get it? Stacy, I sent out an email this morning and it was an attachment to that email. Oh, you registered late. When did you register, Stacy? Let me send it to you really quick. Oh, okay. That makes sense. Do you mind to give me your email really quick? Oops. Bear with me a second. Oh, that didn't work out. All right, I guess I will type it in. Nope. She happens. Thank you all for your patience. I really need everybody to have this particular document. So
Not a problem.
I really do have lots of templates for, for lots of things. So many things. All right, it's coming to you right now. Okay, can everybody see that template? My Zoomies, can you see this template?
Thumbs up, something.
Yeah. Nancy, can you see this template? Anyone?
Can I hear you?
Can you all hear me? Well, that's making me nervous.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Nancy. You can see the template. All right, we'll carry on. So the way that this template works, and hopefully you all, I printed it all out so you can see it, but I'll kind of talk through it up here. So this template allows you as organizations to set goals for what you want to fundraise. And it lists here the different ways that you can fundraise. So it's got certainly the individual donors, major donors that we talked about and what those were. It's got board giving. It's got special events, those private foundations, those government grants, and the business sponsors and earned revenue. So that's the ways we can bring bring funding into our organization. Oh, Nancy, you can't see the template. Let me try sharing it again. I'm not sure why you all can't see it, but we'll try it again. Do you see it now?
Yeah, you're good. It's up on the screen now.
Okay. That's what I was worried about before. Okay. So just going down the template and looking at the different ways that you can get funding for your organization. All the different ways that we discussed. I don't have bequest on here, but you could certainly add it. Again, this is just a template. And you could even add it under major donors or individual donors. It doesn't really matter. So the way that this template works is that I would challenge an organization to seek out that overall fundraising goal. How much money do you want to raise the next year or the next 2 years? I generally challenge people to think about at least 1 year, no less than that. But if you want, certainly if you wanted to do 2, that would be fine. If you wanted to take it year by year, that's fine too. So I challenge organizations to think of, if you wanted to raise $100,000 per se over the next year or for next year or whatever that number is to then take that overall goal and break it down into these different categories. So maybe you want to set up a goal to raise $10,000 from individual donors and $20,000 from major donors. And you wanted to get your board to give, I don't know, 1,000, 2,500, something like that. And you wanted to do some special events that you raised 25,000 from. I'm not adding up these numbers. So if you all are adding, you tell me when I've reached my 100,000. Maybe you wanted to apply for $50,000 worth of grants from private foundations, maybe another 10 from government grants if you can find some that are applicable to you. Maybe you wanted to solicit another 10,000 from business donors and or sponsors. And then maybe you bring in a certain amount of earned revenue. Maybe that's $10,000. And as you identify what those goals are, then you would have to identify what are the strategies that you're going to use. And so your strategies could be with renewing annual donors, if you had those, is that you're going to send out a request via email the first of the year. So send out an email request the first of the year, or in February 5th. You would want to get that broken down into when you're going to do that. And then you'd need to identify how many recurring donors do you have. And if you had, let's say 50, then you'd probably want to solicit that entire 50. And if you have those, if you solicit 50 and they each gave $50, you would put that as an average gift. And you could do this on historical information if you have it. If you don't, well, it's like creating a budget. You have to make it up. You have to figure out what you're going to do. So if you solicited 50, and let's say you wanted an average gift of, expected an average gift of $25, your estimated income would be whatever that 50 times that 25 is. But you might think, well, the economy's been kind of tough. I'm only going to plan that 40 of those 50 are really going to give again this year. So maybe your estimated income would be 40 times 25. And then what are your expenses? If you emailed it out, you really didn't have any expenses associated with that. But if you sent out an actual letter, what are your expenses? The printing, the postage, what are those expenses? And so your estimated income minus your associated expenses would give you your net income, what you're gonna earn from those organizations, or not organizations, individuals. And then when do you want to have that done by? You want to have it done by the end of February? You want to put 2 lines and do one at the end of February and also one in November, because November is a huge giving month. And then who's going to do what? What's staff going to do to make that happen? What's your board going to do? Are they going to provide names? And especially, so these are people who have already given, so you wouldn't need that from them, but maybe your board's going to do phone calls and follow up with those annual givers and just say, hey, did you get the email? Would you be willing to give again this year? Maybe that's their role. I don't know what their role is. So with each of these things on this template, you would go through this process. Major donors, renewing annual perspective. What are the things? Emailing out, maybe with major donors, you've identified some major donors, and maybe that's one of your strategies. We're going to identify 10 potential major donors. So what I would like for you all to do is, I'm going to give you, I don't know, about 15 minutes. And I would like for you to just think of an overall goal of what you would like to raise next year. We're just going to pretend like this is planning for next year, okay? So I'm going to give you about 15 minutes to come up with a goal. And then break that goal down into where you think you could get that money from. Okay?
Is there a like rule of thumb to function off of when you're looking at breaking down your fundraising percentages according to the 4 major types of fundraising, the individual, foundations, bequest, and corporate? Like if one of them is overtaking 50%, is that something that should be like a red flag, or are there any kind of guidelines you can give as we're going about this?
Yes. And let me tell you, let's go back to this. Oh, sorry. Let me stop my share. Let me switch my share. Hold on, because for some reason I have lost my PowerPoint. So let's go back to this. I'm just gonna put this up as you go through this process. And I know a couple of people jumped on late anyways. So as you're putting together what your goals are, I want to remind you that 471.44 billion was given in 2020. And of that breakdown, 69% came from individuals, 19% came from foundations, 9% came from giving by bequest, and 4% gave from corporations. So as I was developing my fundraising plan, I would start looking at how can I get more funding from those individual and major donors, because 69% of the funding in 2020 came from individual donors.
Mhm. Wow.
So instead of saying, well, we're going to get, instead of saying, we're going to get all of our funding, we're going to get 75% of our funding from grants. I would set a goal for grants, whatever it is you want to get. Then when we get down to strategies, of course, you'll have to list a lot more foundation and that you're going to apply for than probably what your goal is, because any of you that have applied for grant funding know you're not going to get every grant that you apply for. You're not going to get everything from whatever it is. Everybody that you ask isn't going to give. Every grant you apply for isn't going to give. So I would use that basic rule of thumb. So I'm going to give you all. So let's say if I give you to 11:55, because I just took up a bunch of time talking. Yes. Other questions? Okay. Set your goals.
Okay.
Generally have it sitting up here and I didn't see any. So.
And it's a lot by the door. I saw it.
Yeah, there is. We got about 2 more minutes. How's everybody feeling?
Good.
Good?
Very cool.
Are those online? Are you doing okay?
Yep, I'm doing good.
Yeah, same here.
Anybody not got their goals set?
I might need the last 2 minutes here.
Okay, no problem.
And we just write it down ourselves, right?
Mhm.
That mine really helped
Mm-hmm.
to do that.
Well, I've started budgeting for next year, so, and looking at the financials. I've only been in my job 3 months, so Yeah. they have really good records too.
Really?
Which helps.
That's great.
Yeah, this is helping so much. Just getting it right in my mind. What to do. I feel motivated. I feel like running out starting now. I'll sit here.
All right, is everybody ready to move on?
Yes.
So we're going to go back to this very first section that talks about individual donors. And maybe somebody will share with me what kind of goal you set for fundraising from individual donors.
Okay, I set a goal for individuals.
Okay. Melissa, you want to share?
They haven't really done any fundraising, so I set my goal at 12,500, which is twice the number of citizens of Mulvane. So get every citizen to give $2.
Yeah,
That is
very
so
good. What about the rest of you? Anybody want to share your goal for individuals?
We're looking at about 95,000 for our individuals.
Okay, good job. Stacy or Nancy, you want to share? All right. So now we're going to think about our strategies, and I'm going to skip from renewing annual donors because I already mentioned that a little bit, maybe sending out an email. So let's talk about, Stacy says she thinks she needs to raise her expectations. Maybe, Stacy, you got to start somewhere, right? So, yeah, correct. So looking at those individual donors, let's look at prospective annual donors. How many of you have a good prospect list for prospective annual donors? No,
No.
none. Stacy, Nancy, Emily?
Not an existing list outside of my head.
Okay. So what are your strategies?
Yes, I do.
You
I'm
do?
sorry for interrupting. Yes,
No.
we do have a large annual fundraiser that we've been doing. This is our 8th year. And
Oh,
so
good.
I've been gathering names and solicit off of that.
Ah, that's fantastic. How many people do you think's on your list, Stacy?
Well, it's low, but it is growing.
Good.
So, I mean, we're within the hundreds, but it is slowly growing.
Good. Glad to hear that.
Starting somewhere, yes.
Yes. So, I think one of your strategies initially probably could be with being able to reach those prospective annual donors is to create that prospective donor list if you don't have one. And so your strategy for prospective annual donors might, again, one of them might be create that list. And if you need to have an idea of a number of people that you want to solicit, whatever that is, if it's 100 people or 1,000 people or 500 people for your first year, especially if you've not done that before, you need to identify what's your goal for the number of people you want to solicit. And then how are you going to identify those people? So let's go back to your boards, your board of directors, because they should be a huge help in providing names, contacts that they have in the community. That's part of their role, that they could work with you on identifying lists. So their friends, your friends, people that have provided any kind of funding in the past for the organization would go on your prospect list. So I would set a goal for whatever that number is to be solicited, as well as what's the average gift that you want them to give. And I don't know, Stacy, if you have the list, then you all have you actually done any annual appeals in the past?
Can you repeat that
Have
question?
you actually done any annual appeals in the past?
No.
Okay. So you'd need to have an idea anyways of how many people that you wanted to solicit and what you were hoping that average gift could be. Now I can tell you, so just so you know, from realistic point of view, so if you solicit, especially your first try around, you solicit and you get 2% back, you'd be doing okay, right? And every year you would look to increase that, how many people will actually respond to that. And of course that varies how much you get return if you're sending somebody out a letter or you're sending out an email. I know that one of the statistics that I'm familiar with is on your first time out, if you send out 1,000 emails, the average return is $42. So the more you can build that prospect list, for one, the more you increase your chances of getting more money. But again, we all have to start somewhere, right? So if you were to send out, let's just say, 500, if you had 500, you create that prospective donor list, you have 500 people that you're going to solicit. And your strategy is another strategy is then to send them an annual appeal and decide when that's going to be, the end of the year. And I can tell you again, well, actually, the most giving occurs in November, December. People are just giving either because it's a giving time of year, or because people need to reach some sort of level to give away a certain amount of their income so they don't have to pay taxes on it. So whatever that number is, and then consider an average gift. And I don't know if you want to hope that an average gift from those that you solicit would be $25, or you'd have to kind of think through that, what you were hoping for. And then if you got, let's say if you got 3% return from those 500 solicited, and you hope for a gift of $25 as an average gift, what would your estimated income be? And let's estimate some expenses, and then what your net income. So I'm going to let you all do one of those lines for individual donors that's related to prospective annual donors. I'm going to give you a few minutes to work that out, so you just have something across there, an idea of what you'd like to see. And then who's going to be responsible for what? And when would you want to do that by? Yes. Go right out here in the lobby, and then kind of go to the left down the next hall. But go all the way across the lobby. Go that way. Did everybody get that done? You're still working on it? How you doing, Melissa?
Need a few more people.
A few more people. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll talk
Yes.
about that.
I took how many people I thought I needed to make the 4,000.
Yeah.
And then divided that by 15%
Uh-huh.
to see how many people I needed to mail something to.
Yep.
and 15% is being very,
Yes. Yeah.
not, what's the word am I looking for? Ambitious.
Yes.
So I would need at least 400.
Okay. What did you all online come up with?
Nothing quite yet. Still scrambling through
Okay,
some of
all right.
our
I'll give you a couple
historical
minutes.
documents.
No worries.
Yeah, the community foundation conference is next week.
Yeah.
So I'll have a much better understanding of
Good.
what I'm doing.
Good, good.
So I have a question.
Okay.
Cindy.
Yes, Nancy?
So for the renewing annual donors, I do have a spreadsheet for our database with to whom I would contact.
Okay.
And you mentioned like who would do that. So I thought that is something I can do since I have that information, but for prospective donors,
Uh-huh.
I thought this was something that the board should be tasked with because they could ask, somebody they have a personal connection with.
Yes.
So,
So that could be
So-
a strategy with prospective annual donors. So how are you going to reach those prospective annual donors? Where you're going to ask your board members to reach out to those people, and how many people do you hope that they will solicit, and what's the average gift you're looking for?
yeah, okay, so that was the number to be solicited. That's something I didn't fill in yet because I thought, what is a reasonable amount? Should it be 5 people? Should it be 10 people? I mean, 5 doesn't seem very ambitious.
5 doesn't seem very ambitious, and I guess it depends on the length of time that you want to have those board members ask. And are you going to have them ask once during the year, at the end of the year? Are you going to ask them have them ask people in the middle of the year and people at the end of the year? Because they could certainly ask different people during those times. They could break that up. But I do think every board member should have some sort of goal for how many people they're going to help you reach.
I agree. So
And that may be a discussion that you need to have with your board to get them to set goals. Because so often our board members, they don't, they don't have those goals. We don't set goals. The board doesn't set goals, but they need to have those goals. And so I think that's worth a discussion with them.
Right. Yeah. So that is one thing I sort of run into. If I don't say, if everybody could think of, say, 10 people.
Yes.
Because if you just say, think of some people that then it's sort of just out there. And then
you're right.
And then if it's okay for me to ask another question.
It is.
So since it's for our music camp, I think for us to start asking, say, February or March, because we can frame it as we are looking ahead to, the coming summer, and we're looking at like, especially scholarships or things that we will need. And so we need this money. And so my question is, like, so many people, I get so many solicitations at the end of the year.
Yes.
So, I have right at the very end of the year, I noticed that I would get emails, and I actually did that at the very last minute one year. And I did get some money, but it was just sort of unexpected. That was kind of like a little bonus.
Sure.
I didn't want, I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. But I I feel like for us, it would be more effective but I think doesn't hurt to try to contact those same people at the end of the year in the hopes that maybe they'll give at least maybe a smaller amount, but at least something.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
You're absolutely right, Nancy. And although we're working right now on one strategy for these individual donors, I would expect that as you took this back, that you worked on, so we talked about an annual appeal, and maybe that's an end of the year annual appeal. Maybe a strategy is just you're going to send one out in the middle of the year. Maybe another strategy is you're going to participate in Giving Tuesday, and you're going to get individual donors that way. So I would expect you to, I mean, Melissa said your goal was what, 12,400?
12,500.
Okay, 12,500, sorry. I got that off by 100. So I would expect that you couldn't just do one direct mail or one email appeal and get that whole amount of money. So what are the other strategies? You use this template to flush out, okay, what are all the things you're going to do to try to reach those individual donors? Those prospective donors. You've created that list. What are you going to do throughout the year? Because expecting to just send out an end of the year annual appeal and raise that kind of money is not going to happen. So you should be thinking about, what are you going to do every quarter, or what are you going to do every month? Are you going to add something? If you do a newsletter, you're going to add an opportunity to give in that newsletter. You know, are you going to provide an opportunity on your website to donate? So you should think about all the different things you're doing to try to reach those individual donors. It's not going to be more, it's not going to be just one strategy. You got to flush those out. So that's what the template's for. We'll go through one today, but this is a document, work in progress, right? Something for you to work off.
Okay.
So yes,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Because when you were talking about Giving Tuesday, that reminded me that somewhere I had read that because a lot of that's like social media type things.
It is.
So maybe choosing like another day for your nonprofit, like say for camp, like the day that we actually incorporated, which I think is like April 4th or something like that.
Yeah, you can do that too.
And it's that I would assign to somebody, because it's really time consuming to do all that. But I thought that would be a potential way to reach some other people, and maybe those people are giving like $25, you know, whatever. But if you got enough people, it would bring in an additional income.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, there's lots of different ways to reach those individual donors. So be creative in how you think that you'll reach them. So let's move on to the major donors. And again, you know, the expectation is you all can use this as a starting point. So with your major donors, you're going to reach them a little bit different, because those people that are going to give $10,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 aren't necessarily going to do that when you send them out an email. Yes, Stacy, I will be sending out all the slides.
I thought my major donors would be like 250 or 500, but we're tiny and just starting.
Sure. Well, I mean, at that point, that for you, that could be your major donors. But those major donors are going to be people, again, that have the capacity to give more money, and you're going to cultivate relationships with them. So one of the things that you might need to do there, you've got your prospective annual donors that you want to target. And maybe the strategy, if you don't have a prospective annual donor, annual donor list for those major donors, is to create that list. So here's what I generally challenge people to do if you don't have a list, is to identify in your communities or whatever, 25 people that have the capacity to give big gifts. Now, here's how you can find out that information. Sometimes you watch the news and you see so-and-so gave so much money to such and such organization. Sometimes you go into nonprofit organizations, and I'm terrible about this. Every time I go to the Humane Society, I go look at their donor wall and I say, how, because their donor wall says these people gave $100,000 and these people gave $500,000 and these people gave $10,000. So I go look at that. Some other secrets are, if you go look at organizations, and if you were to look at an organization that maybe does something similar in your community, or maybe doesn't, if you go to the IRS website and look up that organization and look at their 990, it will list their top donors. So you can kind of get an idea of who's giving to what. I also watch the newspaper, magazines, other different events that are being advertised. The sponsors are such and such, the table hosts are such and such. So I'm watching for names of people that I know have the capacity to give big dollars. And lots of times in our communities, we kind of get an idea who those people are, because they're business leaders and they own banks or whatever. They have money. So I asked people to identify a strategy to identify 25 potential people. I may have already said that. And then as those 25, prioritize them. Who would you feel most comfortable reaching out to first? Because these are going to be, here's your, let's say you start with your top 5 and you just reach out to those people to have meetings with those people to tell them what your organization does. So you're going to begin that cultivation process, which I think I have another free session that goes into just that cultivation process and how do you pursue those bigger donors. And then, eventually you're going to solicit that donor. You're going to ask them for whatever, maybe 250. Generally 250 would be pretty small, but maybe 1,000. But you're going to figure out, what you can ask them for after you've kind of developed that relationship. So these donors are going to take a little bit more time to build relationships with, but they're going to be able to give you a lot more money than what your individual donors are. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about what kind of strategies you might want to use to reach those prospective annual donors. How many and I don't know what your goals are. Anybody want to share their goal for major donors?
Well, our goal for a major donor?
Yeah, what goal did you set for major donors?
$4,000.
4,000. Okay. Anybody else online want to share what their goal is for major donors?
This year we're shooting for around 25,000.
Okay.
And I also just wanted to share, because as you were talking about identifying the top 25 potential donor kind of things,
Yep.
It reminded me of a strategy for like developing clients that I used to use in business, which was the 10-10-10 strategy.
Yes.
And so you have your top 10 which are like, they get a lot more of your attention. They get like a majority of it because you're trying to develop them into your top clients. Yes. And then the next 100, which is you multiply by 10, is the ones where you have like more of the connection with, but it's not like always personal phone calls. It might be with 100. And then you have your 1,000, which is like your email list and people who are passively consuming your content and such.
Yes.
So I don't know.
Yep.
Thought I'd throw that out there.
Thank you for sharing that. Those are good rules. The 10-10-10. So take a couple of minutes and kind of think about what are the strategies, or how many you think that you want to solicit over a year, what average gift you hope to get. Can you take a few minutes and do that?
Now, did you say that we go to the IRS website? Is that what you said?
And look up, you can look at, there's nonprofit lookups.
Okay, nonprofit.
Then go look at their 990s.
I've been using the foundation directory to figure out who's 990s I want to get.
Yeah.
Look up now. Okay. Well, I already know mine. The big donors.
Oh, good.
I mean, that, you know, the amount that I would. want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
celebrate.
good, good. Everybody got something strategized out? Everybody online good? Anybody want to share what your strategy is going to be? How many people you're going to solicit, what average gift you hope to get?
I'm gonna do. I want to do 25 of these big
Uh-huh.
celebrations, and I hope to get.
Okay. Anybody else want to share?
We've talked about sending out a flyer to explain to the community what a community foundation is, and
Uh-huh.
I think I'm gonna add a donor
Yes.
flip to that flyer.
Yep.
And then that way, and probably have my maximum gift is
Yes.
$25.
Yep.
And anybody that sends $25, I will move that to that
Yeah.
for that list of 400 people I need to build.
Good,
Plus
good.
who all the board members know,
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good.
Good.
Mhm,
and then do the bigger ask
mhm.
at a different time.
And on the foundation, you probably have some pretty good connections on your board, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I figured as much. Most foundations do have
Mhm.
really some big hitters per se on their board. So let's talk a minute about board giving. And again, you know, with the major donors, you would kind of have to think through what are the other strategies? How often do you want to meet with people? What do you want to, what information do you want to share? Those types of things. So does everybody's board have some sort of requirement for giving? No,
Mm-mm. Not that I'm aware of.
no. Stacy, Nancy, Emily?
Theoretically we do.
Oh,
Uh,
theoretically.
Yes. So it's written down somewhere.
Okay.
But has not been widely accepted.
Okay.
So that's something we're looking to probably enforce more in the upcoming years. And whether it be like a direct board giving, or we give them a number and they have to solicit that much within the year too.
Okay.
I know the volunteer director before me had a point system. And they had to stay above so many points to stay on.
To stay on the board.
Or
Okay.
to be solicited to come on to the board. Based on their diversity, how involved in the community they are.
Yeah.
And other criteria.
Very good. Very good. So this is an area that I would recommend that you try to work out with your boards to get that commitment. So I can tell you here at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber how we do our board giving. So number one, we have a board commitment form that new board members sign that outlines what the expectations are of them as board members. And one of that expectations is that they need to give something financially. It doesn't matter that they go get sponsorships or silent auction items or whatever it else they do. We want them to give something financially, because when funders ask us, is 100% of your board giving, we need to be able to tell them yes, because we don't want to lose that funding from funders that say, well, if 100% of your board's not giving, we don't really, you know, if they're not that committed, why should we commit our dollars? So we want to be able to say that to them. I would be willing to share that commitment form. Yes. So what we do is our new year begins January 1. That's when our fiscal year runs. And we have a pledge form that we have identified. We've asked our board members to give a gift, a suggested gift of $250. They also have to be members of the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber to even serve on the board, so they have to pay membership. But that's one of the big asks that we, $250. So at the beginning of January, our first board meeting, we have a pledge card that everybody gets a pledge card. They can complete that pledge card with the $250 amount or $100 amount or $1,000 amount or whatever. The expected gift is $250. But we realize that some of our board members have a lot more money than others of our board members. And so we give them that option. We asked them to complete that pledge card and turn it in at the next board meeting, so the February board meeting. And when they turn it in, they, like I said, they could choose to give more, less. They could choose to pay it annually or monthly or all at once if they want. They can choose whatever, however they want that done. Then we send out a reminder if they didn't turn that in, that we will invoice them for $250. And so by March, we're sending out an invoice. If they haven't turned in their pledge form, we will just send them an invoice for $250. Now they can pay that $250 invoice if they decide in quarters or by the month. They can pay it all at once, or they can still come back and say, well, I can only give $100. So they pay $100 of that invoice. So we've communicated with them a couple of months, and then we've sent out an invoice if they don't follow through. And so that was something we implemented a few years ago because we were running into the same issues of some people were paying, some people weren't. We've got 100% participation now because we've made it easy. We've sent out reminders. We have flexibility, but I think it's very important to do that with boards and have them know that that's the expectation to give. And some organizations will define that amount. Some organizations will just say, we expect you to give a stretch gift. Our board decided that we would identify a certain amount because we had so many board members saying, well, what really is the expectation? If I give, 250, is that enough? If I give 100, is that enough? And they just didn't know, and they didn't want to give less than what we really thought that they should give. So we tried to make it something that was reasonable, that we felt like most of our board members did have the capacity to give, but occasionally we get somebody on that just doesn't have as much income, and maybe that's a little bit more difficult for them. So that's kind of how we do it. Whatever that way is, I would expect that on this form that you would work through the board giving, and then you could be able to say, well, we have 18 board members and we expect each of them to give $250. So the estimated income is whatever that is, and you shouldn't really have any expenses related to that. So you should have a net income and be able to depend on that. So that should be an easy goal to set, and hopefully a relatively easy goal to achieve. Emily, your thoughts?
I really like this idea. I think that we will likely implement it.
Okay. Like I said, it's worked well for us. We had that struggle prior, so we'll continue doing that. So whatever those strategies are for your board giving, you can set those up. So let's look at special events. Anybody want to share what their goal is for making money with fundraising events?
I set mine at $6,700.
Okay, Melissa said hers at $6,700. So what's the event name? Or is there more than one?
It's one event.
Okay.
We're gonna have a Christmas tree lot.
Okay.
We researched it this year, got a little too late, but we're gonna test wreaths this year and then go for the full lot next year.
Okay, so she would identify what her special event is, how much she wants to make from each special event if she was going to do more than one. What are the strategies going to be to put that together? And it might be, well, we're going to form a committee to develop this program. You're going to have to decide how many people do you need to invite and what's your ticket price. And let me just give you some insight about ticket prices for fundraising events. I've worked with more than one organization that said, we want to make our ticket prices $25 so everybody can attend. Well, it really depends on what you're doing. But the point of a fundraising event is to bring people in that don't care if the ticket is $100 or $150 or $200, whatever that ticket price might be, because they have enough money to come to that event. And then when you're doing your silent auction, your live auction, or whatever it is you're doing, selling wine pool, doing wine pools or whatever, they can throw out that extra money because they have it to spend. If you create a ticket price of $25 because you want everybody to be able to come, you will not draw those people that have that expendable income to give to your organization. So fundraising events aren't generally about attracting everybody. They're about attracting a specific individuals, people, organizations that have that money to spend. If you want to do just a fun event and charge everybody $25 to do that, and you want to do an event where everybody can come, do an event like that too. That's fine. But the galas and the other things that I see, it's just not a good, it's not a good plan to charge $25 for your events.
Cindy, can I ask a question? Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. So I'm really glad you said that, because I was one of those people who wrote down $25 for the so and again, the event that I was thinking of was, so I just increased the ticket price considerably. Having a concert that would involve, like, part of the concert campers or just kids who are potential campers, and then perhaps some of the faculty members, and then having hors d'oeuvres. Would that be like a gala that would be attractive to potential donors?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So whatever those events are, you've got to figure out how many people you're going to invite, what your ticket price is going to be, what your estimated income is going to be. Lots of times with fundraising events, we've got to figure out what are the associated expenses. Again, food, drinks. If you're going to sell tickets online, sometimes there's a small fee for selling buying tickets online, which can be passed on to your buyer. It just depends on how you want to do that. So what are those associated expenses, and what kind of net income do you hope to make? Now, I can tell you the other thing about special events is when you plan some sort of a fundraising event, your hopes, your goal should always be that you bring in enough in sponsorships, which we're going to cover sponsorships down a little bit farther, that you bring in enough sponsorship dollars to cover all of those expenses. So everything you make from your silent auction or selling tickets or whatever is all revenue, because your expenses have been covered by sponsorships. All right, any questions about the special events? Any other questions? All right, so let's look at private foundations. Who wants, Nancy, what's your goal for private foundations?
Okay, so I did not quite, it's kind of sort of based on what we've had, like what we've
That's
had.
fine.
So I just lost my notes, sorry. So for private foundations, I would say that I would like to make the goal like 15,000.
Okay.
So because I'm looking at specific organizations that perhaps they would give us 5,000 or something. Well, I know
Sure.
one that specifically focuses on like kids who are needy, things like that, who come from backgrounds where they don't have a lot of funds to come to a camp.
Sure.
So I'd rather shoot for like 15,000.
Yeah, that's fine. Have any ideas? So down here in these boxes, you'd kind of list an idea of who those foundations are that you're going to submit grants for. you would want to capture the name of the program officer. Do you all know why you'd want to capture the name of the program officer for that grant?
So that you know who you need to report back to, what you use those funds for.
Yeah, that for one, but I can tell you from the years of work doing what I've done, that there's a whole lot of foundations that give funding outside of the regular grant cycle. And you probably know this, outside of the regular grant cycle. So if you all think that United Way of the Plains only gives money during their grant cycle, they do not. People build relationships with their program officers and make ask of those foundations outside of the grant cycle. And I've seen organizations get $50,000, $100,000 that was no way involved in their regular grant cycle. If you don't have those relationships with those program officers, you definitely need to build those relationships with those program officers. Because if you're just one of those people that's just submitting a grant application every time the grant cycle comes open and never building the relationships, never really explaining what your organization is doing or cultivating those relationships, just like you do with any other major donors, you may be missing out on funding. So with this section, you just want to list who are the private foundations, how much money do you want to ask them for? Of course, the program officer, and it says date of meeting with the program officer. So schedule some sort of meeting with that program officer to talk about your organization. I know Kansas Health Foundation. I know Wichita Community Foundation. I know United Way. They're all organizations that give out funding outside of the regular grant cycle. So, and then how much money do you want to ask each one? And again, whatever your goal is, I mean, you might have, what was your goal, Nancy? 15,000? 5,000? I can't remember your goal.
15,000.
Okay. So if your goal really is to bring in 15,000 from some private foundations, and depending on what you're going to ask each of those foundations for, you know, you might want to list 5 foundations that you're going to ask $10,000 each from, because you're not going to get 100% of the donations or the grants that you apply for. You can also flush out what the application deadline is. So you can use this to plan what grants you're going to apply for each month or what grants you're going to be applying for the first quarter. I would just line that out so you have some sort of a plan. Government grants, kind of the same thing. I'd build those relationships with the person that's overseeing the grants. You're going to want to apply for more grants than what your goal is, more grant dollars than what your goal is. Does anybody feel like they are eligible for government grants?
The
Yes.
city of Mulvane
Oh.
pays my salary.
Oh, good.
They set aside for now 25,000 a year.
Okay.
to Pay my salary and stuff. So
Okay, that's great.
That's from the transient guest tax.
Okay.
from The
Good.
casino. So I put that.
Okay, yep, you should put that in there, definitely. Anybody else? Government grants? Or do you currently get a lot of government grants? They're a little bit more difficult, a little bit more requirements around that. Okay, then let's go down here to the business donors and the sponsors. So again, I'm going to recommend, just like you did with your major donors, that you identify 25 small, local, large, it doesn't matter, but 25 businesses that you think that you want to solicit for sponsorships or just donations overall. Your sponsorships as you develop. So one of your strategies under sponsorships might be whatever event you're going to have. I'm just going to use you as an example, Nancy. So music camp sponsor, and maybe that maybe you want to get a sponsorship for $5,000 for music camp. So you would need to identify what are your sponsorships going to be. So they can be event sponsorships. So maybe you have a meal sponsor, maybe you have a t-shirt sponsor, maybe you have whatever, the alcohol sponsor. There's lots of different sponsorships you can identify. And you can Google organization sponsorships and comes up with tons and tons of ideas for what to name your different sponsorships with your events. I like organizations to think about putting together sponsorship opportunities for their entire year that include not only sponsorships of the different events, but sponsor a child to go to camp, sponsor sponsor the clothing for a child, sponsoring an instrument for the child, whatever those sponsorships look like. I know when I used to do consulting with a local organization and they did clothing for kids every time school was starting back up, then we put together a little sponsorship so you could sponsor the child's new back to school clothing for $150 or whatever. So there's lots of ways organizations can come up with sponsorships. Sponsor our monthly newsletter, it's crazy. There's tons and tons of sponsorships. So I would recommend that you identify, number one, those 25 or so businesses that you'd like to sponsor. I mean, not sponsor, that you'd like to solicit, and then identify those potential sponsorships. And then who are the people, who are the organizations that you want to reach out to? So that could be a strategy, right? You list those corporation names that you want to reach out to sponsorships. You list those businesses, creating those lists. So how many do you want to solicit? What's your target ask amount? What's the estimated income? So can I give you guys about 5 minutes or so to flush out just going once across a small or local business, some sort of a business that you might consider asking to give? What's your strategy going to be for reaching that business or businesses? How many you want to reach? Something like that. Similar to, can I give you 5 minutes to kind of flush something out there? Will that work?
Yeah.
We're working on sponsorships
Okay.
or small businesses, not sponsorships.
Small
Working on
business.
small business, identifying how we can get small businesses or local businesses or some sort of businesses
Yeah.
to give.
Okay. Yeah, we tried that with the local businesses, a few of us.
Yeah, it is. Well, and you saw on our list, 4% of
Yeah.
all of that comes
Yes.
comes from businesses. So
Mhm. Yeah, it's all right.
there.
And you sending this to the emails, right?
Yep,
That lists all that.
I
good stuff.
am.
So should I-
You need more water?
Yeah, I guess.
I mean,
I drink so much, but then I have to keep.
No, I didn't.
You're not gonna drink yours?
Mm-mm.
You
I go to the bathroom worse than you do when I drink it. So I schedule myself to drink at certain times
Oh,
during the
and
day,
And I should have that
plan
much.
accordingly.
I'm sorry, I should have had that much sense to do that.
So anybody got a strategy flushed out yet for reaching businesses that they want to share?
We have a business park that I don't think anyone has, it's an industrial business park, and I don't think anyone's tapped into that resource.
Okay.
So I'm gonna, once I understand community foundations, just go
Yep.
meet.
Good, good. Emily?
We tried something new last year that was very successful for us,
Oh.
which was a corporate solicitation campaign. And
Yes.
so April, we solicited for individual donations too. We got like $60, but the corporate donations, we were able to raise 75,000 with essentially no overhead. And so we're shooting for around 100,000 for that this year. And then an additional corporate sponsorships and revenue and such throughout the year. We're looking at about 30 to 40,000 more than that as well.
Fantastic. I know you all are rocking it over there. You've come a
I take
long
credit for
ways
that
over the
one. That
years.
one's Dr. Fisher.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that idea. And that's again, coming up with an idea what those sponsorships look like, and then going and meeting with these businesses or whatever, and not having to come back 3 or 4, like, oh, now we have this going on. Oh, now we have this going on. And they get to where they're like, okay, what do you want now?
We found it really successful with that campaign to have different sponsorship levels where they get kind of a nominal reward for some sort of recognition, usually,
sure.
like a gift basket, that kind of thing. But our most effective element of that was the kind of how we broke it down to how much funds support each student. And so then in the recognition,
Yes.
this is the number of students this company supported for a year. And that was really effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Telling those stories, showing how they can support, that's huge. All right, we're gonna move on into, you know what? I should give you all a break. You all want a break? Oh my goodness, it's 12:48. You know what? Why don't you all take a break? I'm so sorry. Why don't you take a break till about 1 o'clock and come back, and we'll finish going through the rest of this. I usually give a break like every hour. I didn't pay
What
attention.
time is this over?
1:30.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I thought it was over at 1. So.
No, take a break.
Okay.
Is this for people?
Yes.
I can't eat the cheese or the sausage if anyone wants it.
No, thank you, but I can't have anything. Yeah. Nothing.
It's all
That's okay. That's all right. When I leave here, I'm gonna get some.
All right, well, it's 1 o'clock. Again, I apologize for not giving you all a break earlier, but here we are down to our last section. And again, I would, I could recommend to you that you add a goal of doing those kind of soliciting bequests. The thing about soliciting bequests is they're hard to plan for because you just don't know when people are going to pass away. And so that's probably why this, I didn't put this in the template to start with, but you could certainly include it if you wanted to, maybe long-term fundraising plan. So let's talk a little bit about our last section. Does anybody do anything that you have found just regular earned revenue from? Nancy, do you have some from camps? Do you have parents that pay for kids to go to camp? Oh,
We've had that happen. We've
Okay.
had sometimes a parent who's already sending a camper
Mhm.
will pay for somebody else, or if they decide at the last minute they have to withdraw.
Yes.
So a lot of people want refunds, but sometimes they'll say just keep the money and use it for another camper,
Okay.
which I really appreciate.
So that's not exact. That wouldn't be. And Stacy mentioned raffles. Those wouldn't actually be.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Those would be more of donations as opposed to just actual earned revenue. So
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't hear the whole question. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, Stacy already mentioned about the raffles would be more that probably aligns with your events, even though it's not it's not like a regular event. But Emily, do you all have any earned revenue? T-shirts that you sell? Oh, raffles is in earned revenue. I'm sorry, Stacy. It is in earned revenue. I'll be okay.
We don't have any that I can think of really.
Yeah.
Aside from raffles at events.
Yeah, okay. I don't traditionally think as raffles as earned revenue, but really, I guess it is earned revenue. Do you all make much money off your raffles? Do you do those often?
We do it alongside our event that we have, our fundraising event.
Okay.
And we have our consumers that we have at the job sites. There's probably 30 to 40 of them, and they have personal goals, and they have a little competition of who's going to sell the most raffle tickets.
All right.
So we easily bring in $3,000 to $4,000 with those.
Okay. Maybe I need to try a raffle. So you could certainly work out your strategies and kind of list how many raffles you think you'll do a year and where you're going to sell those tickets and how much they are, kind of get an idea. Did you set a goal for this particular section for how much you want to bring in earned revenue?
Honestly, this is all new to me, this creating the fundraising plan.
Yeah,
I just literally have been winging it the last 8 years.
Okay.
I know, doesn't that sounds kind of crazy, but yeah, we just started it and ran with it. Our nonprofit had not been doing it previously, and
yes,
just looked at it as a potential, and it has definitely grown and made money. We've increased so then now we've added additional fundraisers throughout the year, but this has been very, very enlightening and educating. I appreciate it.
Oh, good. All right, so now that we've gone through the template of putting that strategy together, and I'll be sending you off with homework to do with this to finish flushing that out. So let's talk a little bit more about creating the action plan. So you've put together all this information, you know what you want to do, you've put together this template, and then kind of identifying, you've got a completion deadline, you know what staff is going to do, you know what board is going to do. The next step would really kind of be to flush out timelines, even though you have a completion date, timelines associated with this. So if you were going to develop an annual pill and it was going to be mailed out, and you were going to, have something printed by a printer, you're going to print it at house, and you've got to put stamps on it and everything, kind of looking at when that completion date is and backing up from that and creating an action plan for how that actually is going to happen and who really is going to be responsible for each step. So you would kind of work on that. I have a template I can send you out for an action plan as well. You'd also need to identify, of course, what resources are you going to have to allocate in as far as staff and time and money. As I mentioned earlier, when people do fundraisers, they don't consider how much staff time is being put into putting those together, and then creating an overall timeline and calendar for what your fundraising plan is going to look like throughout the year. So what are you going to be doing in January? Because you've got your template, but then it needs to all be put in an order of what's going to be done in January, what's going to be done in February, so on and so forth. So you can prioritize those activities and make sure those things are actually getting done. So as far as creating a development program for your organization, if you don't necessarily have one or you've kind of been winging it, it really is important for you to have a clear mission and vision about what your organization does, and be able to communicate that clear mission and vision to your potential funders. Your case statement, if you don't have one, number one, it's good about telling your story, providing a few statistics, what programs and services the organization has, the people that you serve. So that's kind of what your case statement is, really making your case for why people should give to the organization. And then developing an elevator speech, a couple of minutes why you support, and certainly working with your board members, especially if they're going to be making ask on their elevator speech. Now, some organizations like to write an elevator speech and have people memorize it. I think that's a lousy idea, simply because I've been on a number of boards that created elevator speeches and there was no way I could memorize that. So I just challenge board members and staff to develop their own elevator speech that, if they were with somebody and had 2 minutes to explain what the organization does and why it should be supported, that you kind of have an idea of what that is. And maybe have a story in your back pocket about some person that you served, or how you're making a difference and why it's important for them to do the same. Again, engaging both the board and the staff in this fundraising process is really important. It does require teamwork, more so the smaller you are as a nonprofit organization. Make sure you're really evaluating all the options for giving, all the methods, all, items. So there are a lot of ways people can give. Make sure that, if you take in kind donations, and Nancy, that, might be something that you use in camps, notebooks or something like that. Same with Emily, potentially. School supplies, that might be something that Emily, they might take donations of. But all the different ways, I'd brainstorm on all the different ways that people can give, and then provide opportunities. Social media, do you have some sort of way that they can find on your Facebook page that they can donate? Is it clear where they can donate on your website? Do you ask them every time you send out a newsletter? Do you give them an opportunity to give and tell them how they can give? So I would suggest that you brainstorm about all those different ways that people can give. Storytelling is so important when it comes to giving. Being able to tell the story of whoever you're serving, why you're serving them, again, how that's making a difference, certainly makes a huge impact. Again, it's got to be a team approach. And then make sure that you are stewarding donors. So that's thanking donors in a lot of different ways, not just with a follow-up written thank you card, potentially, depending on the size of the donor they are. If they're, small donor, an email certainly will work, although people really do still like handwritten thank you cards. Get board members to write thank you cards. Educate your board about who's giving. So if they happen, if somebody happens to have given to your organization and they're out in the community and they run into them at the grocery store or an event, they can just go up and say, hey, we noticed that you gave such and such donation to our organization. We just want to express our appreciation. So there's lots of different ways to steward donors and make sure that you're showing appreciation. That should be part of your overall development program. You also need to just think positive about fundraising as a whole. I know it is very intimidating, but if there's lots of ways that you can have fun with it. So think positive, have fun, don't let it intimidate you when you're out there asking. And again, I may talk about this in another slide, but certainly in the other presentation, one of the other presentations, asking people for money. Not everybody's going to say yes. Some are going to say no. For some, it's not going to be right now, but don't let it drag you down. I guess that's really my point. Integrate development into all activities and programs. So just again, make sure that you're providing lots of different ways that you're to give, and you're asking in a lot of different ways. Certainly think of providing opportunities to support your organization or support the youth or support whatever mission that you have. Think about, asking donors as providing that opportunity other than just hitting people up for money. You are really giving them an opportunity to make a difference in the community, in the life of somebody. So you've got to really kind of reframe your thinking about that giving. Oh, I did go to the next slide. All right, let's look really for a minute about providing giving opportunities for everyone. This kind of just shows how the fundraising process works. And I don't want you to forget in your prospects to also include people who volunteer for your organization, because sometimes organizations, they have all these volunteers. They never really think of them as prospects for giving, but actually volunteers who are already engaged are some of the best prospects for potentially giving. And your point really is to work towards getting those small gifts initially. So depending on your organization, getting them involved with membership, getting them through mass appeals or whatever way, moving those who are giving small gifts up into major gifts. So that's bigger gifts than, in that, of course, that depends, because Melissa's major gifts, she's thinking is $250, which is fine, into really big legacy gifts. So those are bigger gifts that they are giving over a longer period of time. So it is really a building prospect. Prospect. I'm looking at the word prospect. Process. Sorry about that. It really is a process. And of course, the other thing about this pyramid that you will notice is that bottom level, you generally start with a whole lot of prospects. And from those prospects, you do move us, not every prospect, but a smaller amount of givers, donors, whatever, into that next section. You're going to have a smaller amount of major gifts that are going to come out in that next level. And there'll be even less people that will give legacy gifts. But the important part is that you're moving them up this pyramid. So where do you find donors again? Certainly ask board members to give up the names of their connections. Collect data. There are lists out there that you can purchase. I have to admit, I've never purchased a list for that reason. I've purchased a mailing list or email list for other reasons, not specifically for donors, but look at the similar organizations, donor databases. I talked about that earlier, honor walls, etc. Pay attention to what's going on. Your community connections, friends, those types of people, certainly people at churches, business connections you have. And speaking of business connections, let's not forget our vendors. We're spending money. Maybe we're spending $400 a month with Cox Communications for internet service or phone service or something like that. But for some reason, we never think to ask Cox to give to us. Maybe we're spending $200 a month with some organization to pay for our copier that we're leasing to own or something. But for some reason, we don't ever ask those vendors to give back to us. So our vendors should certainly be on those lists of businesses that you've got on your prospect list. Anybody ask their vendors or not? Stacy? You all solicit vendors?
I have not, but that has been talked about. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then that top donor list, which we kind of already talked about, prioritize them, calculate that total giving of what they could give. Identify the number of years of continuous giving. And let me tell you something about continuous giving. Some organizations like to do a donor recognition dinner of some sort. And I like to tell the story about, I worked at Butler Community College for 12 years as the director of community and campus relations. And of course I gave to Butler, and they had an annual dinner that they had to recognize people's continuous giving levels, whatever levels they reached each year. And I was always competing with their assistant athletic director, because I had worked with him in my department at one point in time, and we were always trying to see who could hit the next giving level. It was very competitive, but he would give more, so I would give more, so he would. It became just a competitive thing. So it's always good to identify those years of giving in some sort of event. Donors kind of like that. You can do something small for them and recognize giving levels or number of years they've given to the organization, either one. Certainly those who are involved in your organization should be top on your donor list, and those that you identify that are passionate and have some sort of commitment to the organization, make sure that they get on your donor list as well. So we talked a little bit earlier about developing the database, certainly building up the number of donors, making sure that you keep current and accurate contact information. So whether that's in Excel spreadsheet, if that's in a bought purchased donor database, if it's in a free app like monday.com where you've customized something for yourself, whatever it is, make sure that you're keeping that information up to date. Make sure that you're tracking what their giving history is. So how much they give, when they give it, why they give it, if they happen to know. Some people will give because they have some personal tie, a family member's been affected by something, a lot of different reasons people give. And then I just have down there, TechSoup does have some discounted donor database management tools. If you're not on TechSoup and want to check out some of those things that they have for managing donor databases. All right, make sure you're cultivating your prospect. You can communicate in between giving through mailings, materials, brochures, whatever. Make sure you identify some opportunities for those prospects to get involved. So volunteering within the organization, helping out with events, serving on a committee. There's different ways you can build those relationships. Just make sure you identify what those things are you should be doing and following through. And again, these can be some strategies that you include on your fundraising plan. So these are the main reasons that donors give. They do it because they feel like that there's some critical need in the community. We've got to address homelessness. We've got to address, you know, some certain issue. So some give for that reason. Some really just feel obligated to give back, make our community better in some way. Some believe those with more should help those with less. I grew up in poverty, so I don't live in poverty anymore. So it's always been my belief that I can help other people that are in a position that I was in at one point in time in my life. Certainly because they want to bring about a desired impact or result. But the biggest reason is because somebody asked them to give money. That's the biggest reason that they give. And honestly, I don't know if I have it in here, but the number one reason that the donors say they don't give is because they just weren't asked. So it goes back to that asking. So what do donors expect when they give? They expect to be engaged with the organization in some way. They expect to see some sort of results for why they give, and to report back to them. Well, you know, we were able to clothe a child. We were able to do this. We were able to send, you know, 10 kids to camp, whatever that is. It's good to report back to them. And certainly they expect fiscal accountability. I don't know if any of you know, there used to be a gentleman with Spirit called, his name was Brian Black. I don't know if any of you know Brian Black, but Brian Black used to be responsible for giving the money out at Spirit Aero Systems. And Brian told me one time he really disliked it when they gave money to somebody, or somebody came to ask him for money and they brought a very expensive gift or a very expensive something they had printed out that they invested a lot of money in, because in his opinion, that was not really being fiscally responsible, because he's always asked, how much of the money that I'm proposedly going to give are they going to spend on stuff like that? Because that's not helping the mission, right? So he would just prefer that you bring him something on black and white printed paper than anything else, because he didn't want the money wasted. So they expect regular communication. So get them on the newsletter list or whatever, and they expect you to be transparent. So ways donors engage, they give because, you know, they believe in the cause, the organization depends on them, they know somebody, they engage by doing things. So these are some ways that they can get engaged, and it's good to keep them engaged. If you don't keep them engaged, they forget about what you're doing and somebody else is keeping them engaged. Certainly those communications, keep them short. Don't always ask for money. It's okay to call donors up and say, hey, I just want to give you an update on what our organization is doing or what our kids are doing or whatever, something like that. And then invest in content and strategy, and just be cautious about over solicitation. So I heard somebody was presenting recently that talked about, in your thank you note to your donor, don't ask them for another gift. In your letter to them, don't ask them for another gift. They just given. So be cautious about that over solicitation. You don't want to be that person. Also, looking at what the donor wants versus the organizational needs and the impact. They want to know, you know, what will their gift accomplish? Again, how has that changed things? And then just remember to tell your stories, tell your stories, tell your stories. back to stewarding the donor, please don't forget to thank the donor. I have had donors that have said, I used to give to such and such organization, but I never even received a response. And I'm just horrified, bless you, that would happen. Invite them to some of your major events, major gift activities. You can create a targeted communication that goes specifically to them, make them feel special. So that's some of the ways, there's a lot of ways you could steward the donor. And that's it for developing your fundraising and giving you a little bit of input of how to reach those donors and that. But I would like to take the next 5 minutes and answer any other questions that you all might have.
I'll just take this moment to kind of ask a question specific to our organization, but hopefully
Yes,
this is
absolutely.
something that's
You bet.
useful for everybody else as well. We have 4 primary ways that we get our funding through grants, which is mostly like private grants, individual giving, corporate giving, and then other kind of foundations, things like that. Our grants, and if you combine that with like foundations and investments, this year will be 55-ish% to 60%. Our individual is our smallest giving segment, which is 20%, and then we have 25% coming from corporate gifts. And as we're looking to push that in the future, of course, we're going to want to increase our individual giving to some degree. But with that in mind, we're also, like I mentioned at the beginning, kind of entering this potential recession period. And a lot of the connections we have for individual giving, we're looking to build like on a community basis potentially. So what would be your recommendations for like the types of donors we can target for individual, or do we not target that at this point and stick with what's working for us while we kind of ride out this potential recession period?
No, I think you stick with what's working for you and you look for those additional donors that you can add.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would recommend, because I think you always need to be looking for, regardless of recession or whatever, how you expand your donor database and how you expand those individual donations.
Great. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Sense? I want to make sure that I let you all know as well, and I thought of this earlier, but I didn't tell you. So please make sure you're asking banks for funding. Banks are required by law through the Community Reinvestment Act to give so much money, that's a federal act, back into the community. So they have to give a certain percentage every year. And a lot of people aren't familiar with Community Reinvestment Act, but just don't forget those banks, because any business that's required to give back, you just as well be asking for money, right?
Now,
They make great board members.
They do make great board members.
3 of my board members are Carson Bank.
Oh, good.
So I wonder how they would feel if I asked them about the Community Reinvestment Act.
I think you should ask them. Any other questions or comments before we wrap up? Yep, I will do that, Stacy. I'll get that information out, get the slides out, the board commitment form. I'll send you the action matrix as well. And if there's no other questions or comments, thank you all for participating today. Hopefully this was helpful. We will have some other sessions coming up that are all tied to fundraising, so you might check those out either on our website or on the Recovery Connect website. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
You too.
Oops.